the Soviet occupation, has remarked, and I quote, "The Taliban advance in the front line completely surprised me." I then realized that the Taliban must be possessing some kind of weapons more advanced than what we had seen, possessed, or known. Mr. Muslim, the commander continues, "Chemical weapons hasn't crossed my mind until the evening of September 26th during the Taliban fierce attack on Lataban. I received radio transmission that a large number of our men were being lost, and even when I commanded the rest to retreat, I heard no reply. I contacted my headquarters. I was ordered to examine the front line. 1 hour had passed since my initial contact with the front line. When I reached there, then I saw Commander Sabur laying dead on the battleground. I only noticed blood around his nose and ears. Sabur was a close friend of mine. Suddenly, I had a flashback of the Red Army using similar weapons during the jihad, and I really wanted to take his body back with me, which had no trace of external injury. But the intensity of the fighting did not give me the chance." Unquote. Mr. President, based on the above account, it is the strong conviction of the Islamic State of Afghanistan that the foreign sponsors of the Taliban have provided them with some type of internationally banned gas or chemical weapons used in the Taliban onslaught for the capture of Kabul, the capital, where they encountered strong resistance. We are bringing this tragic episode to the attention of this August Assembly and therefore appeal to the international community to immediately assign a team of inquiry to investigate the above-mentioned case. Mr. President, the Islamic State of Afghanistan has continuously provided information to the United Nations Special Mission and to the Security Council about the military acts of the Taliban, who have systematically rejected to accept the United Nations peace process. Already in a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, dated 6 September 95, document S/1995/767, the government of Afghanistan was warning the international community about the dangers of fragmentation and disintegration of Afghanistan, and warned of the possibility of the Taliban military advances of getting out of control. In the letter to the Secretary General, dated September 14, 95, documents S/1995/795, the Islamic State of Afghanistan forecasted, and I quote, "The outcome of this new tension as alarming as perilous," unquote, and earnestly called for the prompt dispatching of a fact-finding mission to Western Afghanistan in order to report during the consultation to the Security Council, unquote. The Secretary General of the United Nations, in a letter dated September 22, 95, was assuring that, and I quote, "The United Nations remains committed to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Afghanistan and opposed to all external interferences in your country. I'm using the mandates entrusted to me by the member states to do all I can to resolve the sources of conflict which contribute to instability in Afghanistan. I shall continue," the Secretary General says, "I shall continue to pursue a comprehensive approach to the overall peace process, in which the special mission will continue to play the main United Nations role. I ask that you continue to cooperate with it," unquote. In the letter dated, in the same letter, the Secretary General assured the Islamic State of Afghanistan, quote, "The Taliban not only undermined peace and tranquility in the western part of the country, but in the meantime pose an external practical menace to the territorial integrity of Afghanistan. The most reasonable and practical way to peace and appropriate atmosphere for a peaceful transfer of power to an elected authority enjoying the confidence of the people is first and foremost the need to seize off the present crisis of confidence," unquote. In the general debate of last year, October 4, 95, document A/50/PV19, we declared that, quote, "reactionary groups which try to destabilize a moderate Islamic system believing in democracy and human rights are wrong in their assessments and calculations. Such foreign circles may think that after the usurpation of power by the Taliban, all will go well for them. In fact, they will add a further problem, especially by bringing onto the scene a faction which has no factual presence on Afghanistan's political scene. These circles should be aware that the peace and security in the capital, the actual relative peace and stability in the country and in the region would be jeopardized by such an erroneous miscalculation. The same error was made by the former Soviet Union in 1979, unquote. As far as the activities of the United States Special Mission, Mr. President, we suggested in a letter dated October 6, 1995, that the efforts of the Secretary General and those of Ambassador Mahmoud Misteri, head of the United States Special Mission for Afghanistan at that time, would benefit from the establishment of a contact group on Afghanistan composed of states, but not ones immediately involved, as well as of interested organizations, unquote. Through the letter dated October 12, 1995, we warned the different leaders of the Taliban have several times declared their rejection of the United Nations Special Missions proposing to accept a ceasefire. They have also rejected the proposal for peace talks with other parties to the conflict, unquote. Similarly, on November 11, 1995, the Taliban launched as many as 170 rockets on the civilian populated sectors of Kabul, as a result of which 37 innocent lives were lost and more than 52 civilians wounded, while immense damage was inflicted upon public property. Document A/50/748, dated November 14, 1995. This is why, in a letter dated November 16, 1995, addressed to the Secretary General, the Islamic State of Afghanistan, inquired about the identity of the Taliban, their ideology and goals, their rejection of peace process, and their negative attitude toward the United Nations. As a result of the heavy bombardment by the Taliban of the capital on November 26, 1995, the Secretary General expressed his concern about the escalation of fighting and called upon all parties to cooperate with the efforts of the UN Special Mission, headed by then Ambassador Mahmoud Misteri, aimed at achieving an immediate ceasefire and promoting negotiations among the parties on a transitional mechanism for the transfer of power to achieve a just and durable settlement acceptable to all Afghans, unquote. During 1996, Afghanistan continued to keep the United Nations well informed about the atrocities committed by the Taliban. Document S/1996/44, dated January 1995. On the 9th of April 1996, the Security Council of the United Nations held 2 meetings on Afghanistan. During the meetings, a delegation of Islamic State of Afghanistan provided adequate information on the role of the so-called Taliban in causing a turmoil in Afghanistan and threatening the peace and stability of the region, as recognized by the Security Council in a statement to the press on December 13, 1995. Mr. President, in the letter dated August 22, 1996, from the President of the Security Council, addressed to the Secretary General, document S/1996/683, it is stated that the members of the Council, quote, expresses their strong views that the warring parties should renounce the use of force and settle their differences by peaceful means and through negotiations. The members of the Council are convinced that the main responsibility for finding a political solution to the conflict lies with the parties and that all states must refrain from interference, unquote. Mr. President, the Taliban have consistently held a rejectionist attitude and still act against the letter and the spirit of the all Security Council and General Assembly resolutions and decisions. Given the above account, I must say, Mr. President, this is the time to look back and see who is responsible for the ongoing human tragedy in Afghanistan. Was it not the lack of any appropriate response by this organization to the intransigent attitude of the Taliban that encouraged and enabled them to see the tunnel wide open and to pursue their designs crafted by military-industrial magnates from abroad? The Islamic State of Afghanistan had continuously warned the United Nations about the possible outcome. Who is to blame? And could we consider it the conspiracy of indifference or conspiracy of victimization? Regardless of which one, Afghans' blood is being spilled. And Mr. President, one thing manifested by the indifference thus far is that Afghan blood is not cheap, rather worthless. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, let us come back to the drastic events that last couple of weeks took place. The government forces evacuated the capital in order to prevent a bloodbath. The Taliban invaded Kabul on the morning of September 27, 1996. The government authorities relocated their headquarters and offices in Taloqan, the capital of the northern province of Takhar. Resistance against the Taliban is not only limited to the Panjshir Valley, where the Taliban are conducting widespread and extensive battles, targeting civilian areas. In many other parts of Afghanistan, under the rule of Taliban, there exists the potential for resistance. Soon, you will hear about uprisings. In today's circumstances, the objective of Islamic State of Afghanistan have not changed, and I would like to emphasize once again our firm commitment to the United Nations General Assembly resolution on Afghanistan, adopted by consensus on 19 December 1995. The provisional setback of one party in a conflict and the territorial territorial gain of one side could not mean the prevailing of peace in the country. Mr. President, military occupation cannot bring about conflict resolution. On the contrary, the escalation of tension once again necessitates a negotiated settlement of the conflict through a mechanism formulated in Operative Paragraph 4 of 19 December 95 resolution on Afghanistan. This provides a solution to the crisis in Afghanistan through the UN peace process. A ranking UN official has expressed his concern by stating, and I quote, "It's frightening. This is going to be the government because these men have obviously had no experience but fighting," unquote. Los Angeles Times, October 5th, 1996. The Taliban, who have invaded the capital city of Kabul with a cross-border military assistance, will not be able to ensure the national unity of Afghanistan, especially with what they have done during the first days of their military rule in the capital. The Taliban, in spite of being Pashtuns, neither agree with the majority of Pashtuns of the country, nor with Tajiks, Uzbeks, Hazaras, Turkmens, Baluchs, and Nuristanis and others. The Afghan leaders, intellectuals, and scholars cannot agree with the regressive and backward views of the Taliban. Many religious leaders of the country do not approve of their attitude and deem it incompatible with needs of the Muslims in the modern world. They all consider them unacceptable.